you want us to just introduce ourselves or
Yeah, I was thinking we
have
could all say
somebody?
hello, just hello to one another and see who we're hosting with.
I'm good with that. Sure.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Susan Peterson. I'm a master gardener. I've also worked with Loaves and Fishes for 5 years. The year before the pandemic, we were able to raise 12,000 pounds of vegetables, and we fed 1,400 people a day. And this year, as a master gardener, in the coming 2021, we're looking at putting gardens in many of our different communities. I would like to do the Blaine Community Gardens and just offer what I can to the people to help them grow bigger and better vegetables.
Great. I'll go next. I'm Julie Weisenhorn. I'm with University of Minnesota Extension. I am an extension educator in horticulture, working primarily with home growers, not farmers per se, but I did have the opportunity to work with Michelle Mansky at the Pillsbury United Communities, and I'm going to be reporting on a project that we did together tonight. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
I can go, and then I don't mind just naming people so that we can move a little bit more smoothly. My name is Kazua. I'm the Big River Farms education manager, and I am co-hosting this event, and I'm really excited. Thank you all for coming. Melissa.
Hi everyone, my name is Melissa. I'm the farmer at Pillsbury United Communities, and I'll be co-presenting alongside Michelle tonight. And Michelle introduced herself, but she and the other team you'll be hearing from did the majority of the wonderful research we're going to be hearing about.
Thank you, Melissa. Sonia.
Oh, there we go. Hi, I'm Sonia. I am a master gardener in Hennepin County, but I also am the food systems coordinator at the White Bear Area Food Shelf. But I'm currently on vacation and I love learning about farming. And so I was really excited that this opportunity came up. So cool.
Thank you, Sonia. Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat. I am a staff researcher at the University of Minnesota, working in the soil, water, and climate department. And I've worked with Puck and a few other urban farms in the Twin Cities, as well as looked at soil in people's backyards. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Kat. Mike.
My name is Michael Berry. I'm a beginning farmer at Big River Farms.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer. I am a grad student at the University of Minnesota, so I work a lot with Kat, who already introduced herself, and have been working with White House for the last couple of years. I'm excited to hear about all the things happening.
Thanks, Jennifer. Andy. You're muted.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Andy. I currently work at Twin Orchards, which is a perennial nursery, but I just completed a sustainable horticulture certificate at the Arboretum, and I'm excited to learn more about perennials and urban agriculture here. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Natalie.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm making dinner and wrapping presents so my video's out. But I'm an extension educator at the University of Minnesota. I work mostly with vegetable crops and local foods.
Thanks, Natalie. John.
There, I apologize. My camera is on the fritz right now. but I am actually in Ohio, and I've really been interested in urban ag for a long time, and Minnesota is one of the places that I've been interested in looking at as far as starting a career in that general area. And I came across this event and I thought it sounded interesting, so I'm here.
Well, welcome to Minnesota, I think. Thanks for sharing, John. Norm?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with the, I'm an intern with the Master Gardener program here at the University of Minnesota in Minnesota, and interested in the subject. So I have a background both in hydrology through the Department of Natural Resources, recently retired, and before that in soil science, so at the university. Now I can't hear you.
Oh, Kristen?
Now I can, yeah.
Hi, I'm Kristen and I'm an organic farmer, and my farm is Tutti Frutti's and I'm at Big River Farms.
Hi, Kristen. Thanks, Kristen. Ariel?
Hi, I'm Ariel. I work for Seeds Feeds, which is a St. Louis Park nonprofit that does urban agriculture. And I've just been really interested in this topic, so I'm excited to learn.
Thanks, Ariel. Michelle, I know you briefly introduced yourself way at the beginning, but did you want to introduce yourself one more time for the majority of the people who came in?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Michelle Mansky. I am the former farm manager at Pillsbury United Communities, but I have since transitioned to working at the Savannah Institute, which is based at Madison, Wisconsin, and we work with agroforestry and transitioning farmers from like corn and soy into tree crops to help mitigate climate change.
Very cool. And then I can share my screen so that you guys can start your presentation.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining tonight. Mel and I are going to be co-presenting, and then Julie is going to present on the research that we did together. So we're very excited. And then I will just wait. And thank you, Kazua, for sharing your screen. I needed to see my notes and I didn't realize at the last minute. So today, the goal of today's webinar is really to evaluate the sustainability of our biodiverse perennial production system that was planted 3 years ago, 4 seasons ago at this point, in the Phillips and Ventura Village neighborhoods of South Minneapolis. And we'll share what we learned from our perspective about providing innovative entrepreneurial opportunities for urban farmers or those who are interested in urban farming over this awesome grant that we were awarded through the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. It's called the Sustainable Agriculture Demonstration Grant. So they're the ones who really made this possible. And this is a photograph of like right after this food forest perennial planting was installed. Do you want to add anything, Mel? Good to go.
It's a beautiful garden that has taken many different shapes and forms since day one.
And we'll get into that a little bit. So just really quickly touch base on the benefit of growing in the city, why we should be doing agriculture, why we should be, more and more people should be doing agriculture from my perspective anyways. And really being in the heart of this many people, this many businesses and other organizations gives you so many advantages of a farmer. As a farmer, you have resources, material, funding, markets, prospective clients, visibility for marketing, volunteers, just people walking through. I've had so many people just want to stay, and even if it's just 30 minutes, they're helping and sharing their stories, and it's actually quite remarkable. The ability to address food insecurity directly in the places that really need it, and being able to work with and get to know that community really specifically. The cool thing about this garden is that it is a part of a larger nonprofit, Pillsbury United Communities, and they have a food shelf only a couple blocks away. So a lot of the times the excess food goes to that food shelf, which is going directly to that community, and that food waste is coming right back into the gardens. So it's an interesting closed loop system within the city. And then, I'll be talking a little bit about this more later on, but the importance of having these green spaces in the city. They're really healing spaces for a lot of people where it's hard to find quiet, beautiful places to just sit and be. And like I said, space for stories and connection. And this has shown, studies have shown that this does reduce crime rates in these neighborhoods. So these are really important sites to have. And then just being around it and seeing the interest and dedication from neighbors. Like I said, some people spend 30 minutes there, and some neighbors spend years building relationships around these sites. We have one really special volunteer, Steve. Shout out to Steve, who is just there every day. He's just amazing, and it's changed his life too. So with that, with all these beautiful things that happen in these spaces, there are also a lot of challenges that come with it. And a big one is land security, which is especially, sorry, I just admitted someone, especially for the purposes of perennial agriculture, a huge hurdle for us. And when I was a farm manager at Pillsbury, a lot of my work involved changing that policy. Right now, the city of Minneapolis gives 1 to 3 year leases for these spaces, and we're really trying to push for 5 or permanence. So that's a huge thing that we, all urban agriculture, all urban growers need to be working towards. Another challenge was site security. People using the sites as residences, storage, etc. In rural landscapes, you really have to worry about deer and the occasional raccoon or bird. In urban landscapes, you worry about people and their pets. But one thing that I did find that really helped was signage, just letting people know that this is a space where food comes from. And most people are pretty respectful. And then also just pollution, trash, traffic, because the sites are so public, and then also soil health, which a part of our research was about. So we'll talk about that later. Mel, add anything?
Oh, I was just going to add that people have to worry about deer in rural areas, and we also have to just worry about squirrels eating our tomatoes.
Oh, those squirrels. They don't want to wait until they're nice and ripe either. Take one bite, move on. I'm sure we've all experienced, all of us growers.
We could probably have a whole webinar on how to feed the squirrels but keep our crops.
Yep. Exactly. Ready to go on to the next one when you are, Kazua. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some cool, maybe alternative markets that we were able to work with, and how to market. Some of the market access strategies that we were using, being in the urban environment and just kind of getting a little creative. And so being so visible and being outside every single day makes it really easy to talk with all sorts of types of people. People are walking through your site, walking by, which is really, really fun. It's a really fun advantage of being a part of the urban ag. And then being able to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the city. So going to other people's events and working with them that way. Sharing your story. It's really important to have a story, I think, is a lot of us food growers have come to realize. And the fact that there are several big farmers markets within just a couple miles of these urban sites make deliveries really a lot easier, and the food is fresher, and we didn't really have to have any refrigeration, which is nice. It was just field straight to our clients. And some things that helped us build our own markets were talking to all neighboring organizations and really being a connector and really participating, like I said, in their events, asking them to come to our events. For me, I was always working like during the summertime, you know, working on the plots all the time, which as a farmer, you're already doing that. So you might as well be talking to all the people. And then instead of having sit down meetings with people, I would invite people out to the site to work with me. And, you know, generally at first people are kind of like, oh, but I think overall people really enjoyed it. They loved being outside. They loved getting their hands in the soil. And as we all maybe know or don't know, but you know, the microorganisms within the soil actually affect our mood and make us happier. So I think that was a fun way to have meetings. And then people get to see that what urban farming is, because it's not such a well-known thing right now. People, you think of farming, a lot of people think of, you know, like the big monocultures, the corn and the soy. They don't think about like all these little things that are happening in urban ag. So that was fun to do that. And giving talks and hosting meals and events on site was a huge deal for us. Using social media to share your work and the produce. And then having on-site signage, short, simple signs throughout the property that identify different things, because a lot of people don't know what food is. Also, like some people have never seen a Brussels sprout. And so that was really important to have that in several different languages. Something that was really helpful for us was to have site hours. And that really did reduce a lot of the strange activity that happened after dark. Just having sign or hours posted, and then who to contact for questions, because there are always questions. And it's really nice to have a point person, just your email or your phone number. And then, you know, it's funny, I think about all this work and it seems overwhelming, especially when just being a farmer is so much work. So this is just a list of things that we've developed and worked on over years, over 3 or 4 years. And a lot of it was done during the winter time. A lot of these connections were done during the winter time when farming is non-existent basically, or you're just planning once in a while. And then, you know, Mel and I are fortunate enough to work through a nonprofit. So really had a lot of help doing this type of work. And then, which we'll get to later, partnerships. Partnerships are so amazing for any farmer, I think. It really helped in knowing that this, knowing that if you can be a connector and talking to people. I'll talk about some of the novel partnerships that we did later on. And it just makes me so excited, the things that we were able to do. We would have never been able to do this type of research without the partnerships that we had. Do you want to add anything?
Sure. I think everything Michelle said is 100% true. And signage is just a really big, important piece of having an urban farm. For every reason you said, I've just really learned that this season. And then social media too. I think like as farmers, it's really difficult to make time for social media or to like take photos while your hands are dirty. But I think it really helps connect your story and your farm to a wider network and to more partnerships.
Yeah, just like taking records in the field is sometimes hard.
Yeah, it's so
You just have
hard.
to do it.
And then it's nice to look at in the winter time when you're sad that it's not summer.
Right. Exactly. And so these are just some photos of this amazing community that was created around our urban farms. We have like pizza parties going on with a church that we partnered with down the street. We had schools out helping with us. The youth were able to get into the soil, and we talked about tool safety, and we learned about how to grow your own food. And that was just really fun for them too. And then the photo on the right is every like February to, you know, springtime, we start 200 seeds of tomatoes, 200 seeds of peppers, and then some other various different types of plants. And we have a community plant giveaway sometime in May. And the community loved it. Like everybody was so excited to get a free plant from us that they could start in their own farm and their garden. And we started doing like a seed exchange with them as well. That was a carryover from the farm across the street that I managed, Mashkiki Gitagan. And so it was just a really lovely way to interact with the community and for people to look forward to something every year. And that's all I have for that one. So really getting to the heart of this, the grant, the reason and the way we were able to do this type of perennial agriculture in the city was we were looking at the carbon sequestration possibilities when you're doing perennials versus annuals. What does the labor look like when you're doing that sort of comparison? What can perennials offer in the way of green spaces in these urban landscapes? And then also, how does that change air and water quality within these spaces? So we'll be covering more of the science piece of that in our next webinar on Wednesday, which is happening at 6 p.m. And Kat and Jennifer, who are also on this call, will be presenting then, because those are the researchers from the University of Minnesota that we partnered with. And I just want to quickly talk about this site, and some of, like in the front part of the photo, that's all Julie's work too. So Julie, I'll get to speak to that in a little bit. And that was so fun and so beautiful to have that there. But so left to the left is our Savior's Housing. So it's a homeless shelter. It houses people in transition. And then to the right is a neighbor's house. Across the street is a school. So it's just all these really interesting and fun collaborations and visitors that we had all the time. But when we're talking about carbon sequestration possibilities, it really, what got me thinking about this and why should we write this grant is because in the city, especially in these neighborhoods, the air quality is so low. So can keeping roots in the ground also keep carbon in the ground? Can it pull other pollutants from the air? Not tilling the soil and keeping it covered year round. What are those rates in comparison to any annual agriculture that we're doing? And these perennial crops really provide year-round wildlife habitat and food for spaces that we've really pushed wildlife out of. So bringing that back into the city, and then having perennials have a longer, they do have a longer return period for markets than annual crops do, but they also have a higher value once those substantial fruits do come in. And at least in my market research, there's not a lot of competitors for locally grown perennials like fruits in the market. So it's pretty wide open right now to say like, hey, we grew these apples a mile down the road. There's not a lot of that going out there. So it's a good space to be in as a grower. And the perennials that we planted around the fruit trees, we have things like comfrey, and you can see a large dock right there. And we planted those to help build the soil on site. So twice a season we do chop and drop, which is once the plant grows large enough, and either before it seeds or after it seeds, depending on if you want it to spread or not, you chop the plant back down to the ground and you use it as green mulch. And so really a huge focus of these sites was to build the soil there, which also sequesters carbon. Do you want to add anything, Mel? Okay. So labor, so I chose this photo for labor because if you I don't know if you can really tell, but on the left-hand side, we have this just insane issue with bindweed. And really these sites with perennial agriculture, my hope and dream was that over time, it would take less labor inputs. And that was something I really wanted to look at, which 3 years isn't enough to really make that determination. So at this point, labor has been our biggest cost because of the limited ability for mechanization in this urban setting, but also because of invasives like bindweed that you don't know that I didn't know it was going to be there. It came up the spring after we planted. So I tried to do a few mitigation techniques where you can see on this left-hand side, there's a trellis kind of going up like this. Tried to get it to grow up the trellis. We tried ryegrass with the allelopathic properties. We tried cardboard and smother. We tried pulling it. And so that's really, without the bindweed, maybe this labor dream would come to fruition, but we're just constantly out there weeding. And Mel, do you want to say something about that?
It keeps coming back.
And we don't want to spray.
Yeah, I think spraying it is one of the only ways to eradicate it, but we farm organically, and so we didn't want to do that. But yes, even with many, many hours of work, it still comes back if you smother it with cardboard and mulch in many hands.
So still working on that. Eventually, we hope that the labor aspect of this site in particular will decline, because you're not having to replant every single year, multiple times a year. You're not doing successional planting. So we'll see. Check back in after a few years and see if we've gotten this bindweed under control. All right, so the next one. So this is the like sort of the third tier of the evaluation of sustainability for these sites, was providing green spaces for the city, and the need for urban agriculture and these spaces to be built into city planning, which does require you as the farmer or your partner to be an advocate for that. It raises awareness of where your food comes from. On the photo on the left-hand side, we're teaching some adults how to plant peppers. And a lot of these, or at least this group right here, had never seen a pepper plant. So there's a lot of connections being made that way, because you're so close to so many people, and you're connecting everyone to nature, which provides, like I said before, healing spaces, but it's also so important to the longevity of living in the city. You know, planting trees and perennial agriculture can really lower the urban heat bubbles. It provides better quality of life, air quality, and, you know, if we're going to be planting trees, they might as well be edible. So then this next slide, I just wanted to share this information in case any of you are interested in the starting an urban farm in the city or leasing a plot within the city. We at Pillsbury went through the City of Minneapolis Community Garden lease program. And so there's the website right there, and we can share these slides later. But like I said earlier, it's a 1-year lease to a 6-year or 3-year lease, 1 year to 3 year, as it stands anyways. Okay, ready for the next one. So onto talking about the really cool partnerships that I was able to do as farm manager there. We worked with the City of Minneapolis lead-free program. So people who were going through lead abatement for their homes, we would provide them with healthy foods that would help chelate or pull lead from their bodies by replacing it with other metals, so such as iron. So giving them lots of broccoli, so they had a lot of iron in their diet, so lead couldn't take over. It was a replacement for lead, basically. Selling at Pillsbury United Communities grocery store called My North Market. And it's a social enterprise that Pillsbury does. It was a good way to get ourselves into a grocery store. Doing the Four Sisters Market, which is an indigenous-led farmers market on Franklin, working with the Red Market, which is an online market that connects growers directly to chefs. And I'm not sure if they exist anymore, but they did last year. And then just selling to local chefs in the neighborhood. But then the maybe perhaps more novel partnerships that we did was working with local universities. So, you know, there were times when I was like, what if we need someone to be able to do this thing, like write grants for us, because who as a farmer has time to write grants? So we partnered with St. Thomas University, the creative writing class, and they wrote grants for us. And it was a really great way for them to get experience. And it was a really great way for us to, if nothing else, have an outline to work from when grant writing season rolled around. Some of their environmental groups at St. Thomas helped us collect soil samples. Their civil engineering group helped design solar panels that we put on top of the hydroponic farm that Pillsbury has, which is a skill set that just none of us had. So it was a really awesome partnership. And then we'll be talking more about this on Wednesday, but partnering with the U of M Soil, Water, Climate Department to look at the ecosystem services of urban agriculture. And that's another grant that I'll let that team talk about later. And then to introduce Julie Weisenhorn, who is here today and to share about the project she did with us, Flowers for Pollinators. And I'll let her explain it because I think she'll do a better job of it, but that was a really fun project too. Before I turn it over to Julie, Mel, do you want to say any closing words?
Yeah, I'll just add a note about partnerships. I think it's really great to build those. And Michelle was our former farmer, and upon my introduction to our farms in June, those partners who Michelle created relationships with were still reaching out to us as a farm after building those for years. So I think if you build valuable partnerships, they'll last a really long time and you can help each other out and grow in ways together.
So thanks, that's all from me.
Should we open it up for
Oh.
some comments and questions before we transition to Julie's?
However y'all want to do it.
Yeah, I think we should take questions if you guys have questions. If not, I do have a couple of questions. So how about, do we have a grant that we can write to get rid of bindweed forever? What are the benefits of bindweed and how does it spread? It is a really big deal, but with your experiences with bindweed, how do we prevent it from spreading? I know that mitigation is hard, but how do we prevent it from spreading to our our neighbors or other farmers?
I can tell you what I tried, but I would love to hear from the extension agents in the group. Yeah, that's fair. I don't know about benefits of bindweed. I never really found anything. I guess it could be a nice ground cover, but it also just, it grows up and it strangles plants. So I don't know. Really, because it climbs, if you had enough trellises, if you had a wall of trellises, it could climb up and not spread, but it's underground. It runs by underground roots, so it just kind of gets everywhere once you have it. And I was really hoping the ryegrass would work, but maybe Mel can talk a little bit about if that did or didn't. I transitioned out of my position before I saw the results of that.
Yeah, I wasn't able to see the bindweed issue before I came to the farm. I think the ryegrass must have helped a little bit, but it still spreads so quickly. And I think trellising helps too, because that at least gives the bindweed a place to grow instead of strangling other plants. But then you have the issue that as soon as it flowers, it goes to seed, and I'm assuming it spreads further that way too. And the roots are just like incredibly long. So even though you're weeding it, I'm assuming if the roots are breaking off at all while you're weeding, you're still leaving those in the ground for it to spread further. Yeah. But I'd also love to hear from extension agents on how to remove it. I read that 3 to 5 years of very tedious weeding will remove it, and also boiling hot water and pouring it onto the plant. But we would need like a 10,000 gallon vat in the middle of the garden to be able to remove it all.
I can say something if it's helpful. As the extension agent that people are calling on, Julie, you might have some advice too. But I mentioned in the comments, I had a terrible bindweed problem in my garden. And basically you have to think of it as a perennial that has a deep root system where it has all of its energy stored up. And so the goal is to just deplete that energy over time and not allow it to create more energy. And so basically, I've found when you have bindweed, it's almost impossible to get rid of once it's really established. It's like it climbs up your plants. It is really hard to get it off of your plants without breaking your plants. And so being really proactive and knowing what it looks like as it's emerging, like what the seedlings look like, is super important. And then basically going out, like I would go out for about 2 hours 2 to 3 times a week for like all of April, May, June. And then towards the end of the year, it slowed down a little bit. But basically just like pulling every single one that you see. Obviously, like a systemic herbicide that can get into the root system will be effective. But in an organic system, just pulling it is kind of your best bet. Using something like boiling water or vinegar, some of these like organic treatments, basically they rely on breaking down the waxy cuticle on the plant and killing it that way, but it really is only going to get rid of the above ground vegetation. It's not going to do anything to the below ground. And so pulling it is ultimately more effective than those other strategies. Julie, you work a lot with invasive species. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think all of those are good points, Natalie. Definitely knocking it down. It's a basically well, similar to a morning glory in that it seeds also. So also being sure to cut it back before it starts to seed. And by then, of course, you would have had it climbing all over your plant. So yeah, knocking it down, keeping it back. A lot of the most invasive plants, we just keep telling people to, keep cutting them back, cut them back, cut them back. You got to take away all that resource. There's also timing. If you are going to treat it with something, the timing of treating it is important so that it's, if it's being a perennial, that it's, putting all its energy into its root system in the fall would probably be a good time to treat it. If you do choose to use some type of chemical to deal with it. Yeah, it's a bugger.
Probably even, so I would even recommend, if you know where the bindweed is growing, maybe quarantining it. So like setting out stakes and quarantining it and not growing any vegetation that you're going to be expecting to produce food or whatever it is that you want from it. And then just that way you can catch it when it's young and you know that this is the area that you have quarantined. So the seedlings that grow from there, you just have to assume that that's the plant you don't want and you just hit it then. So maybe consistently doing that for that area just to prevent, because I'm really scared. Like I made a mistake for letting bindweed flower because I thought it was really pretty and I didn't know what it was. And then foolish me, bindweed spread really, really bad. And I forgot who wrote that. I think Julie, you did write that it goes right through landscaping fabric. It really does, and it's terrible. So maybe quarantining it might really help, and just don't plant anything there that you're going to be using, and just plan on picking away when they grow as babies.
You could also try solarization. There's some good articles from Cornell University as well as University of California under their IPM information. And we tried it at one of the sites I'm going to talk about in a minute. And we're successful at eradicating all the weeds in that area. Now we didn't have bindweed, but they were, the only plant that actually thrived under the clear plastic was purslane, which was kind of ironic. And a lot of people grow that and consume it. So, there you have an edible weed right there. But it's pretty effective if you have that. And Kazoya, your idea to quarantine it and to leave that one area, that makes it easier to solarize it because you're not worrying about killing off desirable plants. So that would be one way to go about it. And it's pretty effective I think it's in the University of California paper. I want to say that the top 18 inches were effectively killed off, and that the top 2 inches, it would get up to 140 degrees, the soil. So granted, everything is dead, all the microorganisms, everything is killed off, but you could reestablish those.
Thank you. And Stephanie had a question. What have been your most successful crops?
Are you wondering perennials or annuals or both, anything in general? Okay, well, at least, and Mel, if you want to chime in here too, it'd be interesting to know what you found this year. But for us, tomatoes, perennial mostly. Okay. Yeah, I guess Mel, because this was the year when things actually started fruiting.
Yeah. This year at our Chicago garden, or the Perennial garden, we had quite a few pounds of grapes. I think this is their first year they fruited. And then the elderberries did really well too. Are they 2 years old or 3? 3 years old. So yeah, they fruited and we got like between 4 and 6 pounds from them, just two pretty sweet bushes.
And I know the last year I was there, then there are 2 Nanking cherry bushes, and they were doing so well. And then the rabbits came and just ate them to stumps. So I don't know if they came back or not.
Oh, I should also mention, yeah, I didn't notice cherries this year. So I didn't know if it was a pest issue or if they were just too young. But the strawberries were incredibly successful as well. We got to pick with quite a few kids in the neighborhood who were walking by. But I think just in one day we picked like 5 pounds of strawberries, and they were quite large too. Like most of them got to be really big, and that was a fun day because they were children from, an urban area who'd never seen strawberries growing. And they were just astounded by the size and the flavor of strawberries. So they all went home declaring that they were going to grow strawberries next year.
What variety of strawberry was that? Do you guys remember?
Were they alpine strawberries? I believe that I read somewhere that they were alpine.
I think alpines are smaller, aren't they?
Yeah, those are the little yellow
Yeah,
ones.
the little
or white
ones.
ones. We had, I think it was like up to 5 different varieties that
Wow.
we planted this spring. So I honestly can't remember.
That's okay. Thank you.
Are you guys talking about the Oak Park Garden space?
Nope, that is one of the sites though. No, the one we're talking about right now is in South Minneapolis on
Okay.
Chicago and 22nd.
Okay.
Have you been to the Oak Park?
Yes. I have to make a comment about my growing experience in the urban spaces, because I've been doing it pretty many years with Project Sweetie Pie, then Greenwood Envy, just everything. Gardening Matters board, everything. And my question for you is because when I look at this title that clearly says perennials and justice or whatever this is, what am I in? I wrote it down, but I know it's about environment and perennials and justice. And when I showed up, maybe even like a year ago, it wasn't really expected that we plant any perennials. My heart started to sink and feel as a brown person that here we go, like, what's the importance that I stay, that my community stay, that I'm still here next year? Like if I felt like if the plants weren't supposed to come back, like, am I coming back? And so to see the words perennial meant a lot to me to be at this space, because in the urban area, I'm encountering like, when do we get to grow asparagus? When? You just keep putting on the annuals and come back and rip it up and come back and wipe it out. And it's like, yeah, so I'm really happy to see the word perennial and even in any title, and that justice go along with it, because we want the plants come back. We want to come back year after year, and we want to still be in these communities and see these plants grow. And we want to be here too, alive. So I'm grateful that the conversation about perennials is like taking place. And I'm interested in like, when did you get to start having that conversation that it mattered?
Thank you so much, Stacy, for bringing that up. That was something we always talked about, the importance of putting roots in the ground and what that means for people. I mean, a lot of the Phillips and the Ventura neighborhoods are very transient. And so it's really important for the people who are staying there to be able to say, I'm going to come back next year and I know that this garden space is going to be here. I've learned a lot working in those neighborhoods. I'm not probably the best person to speak to the justice aspect, but I feel it and I really thank you for it. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that, because we didn't speak a lot to the justice aspect. And perennials it's not only social justice, it's climate justice. I mean, and it's a big deal, and it's a big issue. The fact that we can't, well, legally we're not supposed to plant perennials in the urban spaces, but that's what we need. So
I actually have actually I should give people a chance to respond to that question, but I have a spin-off question going along with yours, Stacy. So I was wondering, along with what you were saying, Stacy, I agree with you completely. And I also don't know if I'd be the best person to speak to like the justice portion, but I would say that like doing climate work is also like a form of environmental justice for the neighborhood. And since we are around so many like plant growers right now, I've been trying to find out if it is listed anywhere that it is technically illegal to grow perennials on an urban lot. Michelle, you probably know the answer to this because I've heard a lot of talk about it, but I haven't been able to find like a listed rule that states you cannot.
I would assume it's kind of like covenants, it's got to be in there somewhere.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it necessarily might have to do with per people per se, but maybe who the people who might want to plant the perennials could be. Like you notice a lot in the world, like things are implied, but you clearly can tell it's not meant for me, but it'll be like, you can plant perennials, but not you, Black girl, so you can live here, not you, you can live over here, not you, like there's this conversation, but I know that really they're not talking to me. Or there's a little sentence somewhere that's probably says, not for Stacy, the little Black girl. So it's like, maybe you have to dig and find, like, was it a part of redlining or covenants or home ownership or being able to feed yourself? So where would they hide that information at?
I can speak a little bit to it. Stacy, you're not making it up at all. This is actually a part of history, and this is part of sharing our stories, right? Because oftentimes how people experience things way back in the days, it's not recorded how they experience things. Nowadays, you have social media and people can share those stories, and then movements happen or people can act on it. But I've been telling my family, even I was talking to my mom the other day, and my husband is Mike. he's on this call, but I was telling my mom the other day, like I said, Mom, I'm gonna host a class about perennial and about urban farming, and she was like, oh, yeah, back in the day, they wouldn't let Black folks grow vegetables or farm because that is a way for them to basically oppress the ability to make money or farmers to be able to make a living with extra stuff. And Uncle Rob, he moved to Florida. He even had that same sentiment when I was telling him about it. He was like, that is a form of oppression that has been happening with Black people for a very, very long time, even after the civil rights movement and even after these different things that have happened. So you might not see anything written in policy, but there are a lot of like stealth racism and within systems that are happening. And so kudos to Sonia. You want to look into policy for this. This is great, but policy is a whole different language that farmers are not used to speaking either. And not just farmers, but like a lot of us educators are not even used to speaking. So really encouraging you guys to take stories like Stacy and like to be like, this is real, this is her real pain. And I'm so grateful that you brought this up, Stacy, because it is a way to talk about perennials isn't just about farming for sustainability. It is also about creating roots and systems in place that grows from year and year that that you can come back to and say, this is what I did. This is part of me. This seed came because I put it in there and I can come back to it year after year. So it's establishing those types of systems. And I guarantee you, if you talk to Michael Chaney, you talk to a lot of Black folks who have been in this for so long, they can share you all kinds of stories of the racial inequity that has been constantly happening, and even, you know, how things come into fruition or things get blocked. So really encouraging people to continue to speak up about this. And actually, I was going to ask this question after Julie present, but Stacy, you brought up another question, was what kind of zoning did you guys have to go through to even establish an urban farm? Because I know that there's different counties have different zone abilities for people to even grow produce. Like in Falcon Heights, apparently we can't grow food in our front yard, which I just found out this past summer, which is insane to me. But what kind of zoning or issues that you guys have come across that you had to go through? Because I know a lot of Pillsbury United farms are in North Minneapolis and Minneapolis, but I'm in St. Paul, so our zoning is probably a little bit different from you guys.
Yeah, and just to quickly, like, I also just want to say something about the Indigenous communities that we work in, because a couple of our sites are in there are a lot of different nations within those communities that we worked in, and there's a lot of oppression that came along with that as well. And, you know, it was illegal for a lot of Indigenous communities to grow their medicinal crops. And so a part of those farms were supporting that growth. So I just wanted to quickly say that. But as for zoning, working through the City of Minneapolis lease program allowed for us to not have to deal with those issues. Tamara Down Schwei she leads that program, and she has done so much to make those policy changes to allow for community gardens and urban farms to happen within the city. And so huge shout out to her and the work that she does. So we didn't have to. So we didn't really have to do any zoning. But yes, please call your representatives and get these weird things changed, because we should be able to grow what we want in our neighborhoods and provide the food that we want to eat.
But it's like 1 to 3 years, your dang asparagus seeds you can't even get the asparagus seeds till like the 3rd year, okay? You pray you're gonna get your lease back. So it's like, when do you be brave and be like, I can say I'm a renter, and I've been renting at this house since 2009, and I have had the ability and the gumption to let my landlords know I'm not gonna move there unless you let me farm there. I'm going to plant something in this space. And that has become I've been able to finagle my way around and know that I can speak up and use my voice. But when you're talking about land ownership, which was white males, meant wealth, okay, renters probably usually would be me or homeless. Okay, so clearly to this present day, then we still are trying to fight for renters to all be allowed to grow in the soil where they're renting. So it's still kind of like this. I'm probably expected to be a renter before a homeowner. And so the renters still have like these barriers why they can't grow where they live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know that there are specific laws against perennial agriculture. I do know that when you plant perennials, you plant them with the expectation that you'll have to dig them up when your lease is through. So it's not per se illegal, but it's this weird gray area. And that was a huge driving factor for installing this perennial garden, is because we wanted to show why we need to change these policies and why they're ridiculous. So I appreciate your comments on that. And this could be a whole nother webinar if y'all want to like get together and organize and have these conversations. I think just out of respect for Julie's time, if anyone has any closing comments, maybe we can say those now, okay, I didn't know. I just kind of wanted to transition, and I wanted her to be able to share this amazing, really cool work that she's doing also. But I really appreciate this conversation and super open to having more of this conversation.
Okay, awesome. If anybody has any more comments, feel free to speak up or put it in the chat. And also, if you want to have these type of conversations, feel free to connect with me. I can put my email down at the chat after this, but Julie, you are welcome to take the table.
All right, well, I'm going to actually be talking about annual flowers and pollinators, which is another part of important things about growing. And so I love this conversation though, and appreciate all of the input. There's so many great perennial plants that are edible, and I would love to see it be something that's planted more often, more frequently. They're oftentimes the plants that we truly love. I mean, we like a lot of the vegetables and annuals too, but boy, some of those berries, that's my favorite thing to grow. So I can appreciate the passion behind that and the importance of the food justice and the ability to grow what you want to grow. So we're going to switch gears here, and I'm going to talk about a project that it's actually two projects. One kind of was a tangent from this first project, and Michelle was one of my partners in this. And we want to talk about flowers for pollinators, and then the tangential project is called Pollinators for Food. I have a lot of pictures because it's a cold, dreary day in December in Minnesota, and I thought it would be nice to kind of revisit some of the the pictures of the insects and flowers. We all know as farmers and growers that pollinator stressors are critical, and in particular nutrition, which comes of course from the nectar, which is the energy drink or the sugars for the pollinators, and then also the pollen, which is proteins. And so one of the pieces of advice that we give people, and I work primarily with consumers. I do work with the landscape industry in the landscaping area and plant selection. And so I'm always interested in what are some of the best plant recommendations that I can provide. So it's a little bit different aspect from being a grower. I do work with master gardeners too, and I know a number of you are master gardeners on this presentation as well. But we're always being advised and advising people to plant flowers that are pollinator friendly and attract pollinators. And annual flowers are one of those kind of groups that they get dismissed. And annual flowers, of course, complete their life cycle from spring through fall in Minnesota. And we've seen a lot of insect activity on annuals. We have the need for annuals in certain kinds of gardens. And then there's a big popularity, of course, around annuals too. So they're a big portion of the industry sales. It supports a lot of the economy. It supports a lot of the economy around our green industry, our horticultural industry. So we wanted to find out how pollinators and annual flowers and how attractive are they to pollinators? And we actually spent 4 years, and I say we because it involved master gardeners. It involved Dr. Mary Meyer, who is an extension horticulturist. It involves a lot of different kinds of people. So I'm going to use the term we. And there's been a number of earlier related studies. Mount Cuba, which is down in this on the East Coast, they've done studies on annual flowers and how attractive they are to pollinators. Our university Department of Entomology, which studies insects, they have studied some of that as well. And then in 2015, Dr. Meyer and her graduate student, Michelle Wisdom, well, to be honest, we had heard in horticulture a lot about, that annuals are kind of useless. They're only ornamental. And there are some that have been bred to be not terribly receptive or easy to do business with, as I like to say, for pollinators. But they did kind of an informal study out at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in the annual garden. And there we have lots and lots of different kinds of annuals and cultivars, and they're planted in blocks of 6 to 12 plants. So you kind of get a nice big mass of the same plant. And Michelle Wisdom went out and recorded insect activity on the annual flowers, trying to find out what insects were attracted to which flowers. And she looked at honeybees and bumblebees and native bees, as well as ants, butterflies, flies, and some others as well. And there were really 4 that came out, this is back in 2015, as kind of heads and tails above the rest. And the Dakota Gold sneezeweed, the Heather Queen agastache, the Showstar Melanopodium, which is called a butter daisy, and then a salvia called summer jewel. So that was the results for 2015. And again, it was kind of an informal type of study. Well, we kind of picked up on that, Mary and I. We said, let's do this a little bit more. And so I engaged the Master Gardener program. They do seed trials every year in 2016, and had the Master Gardeners observe insect activity on annual flowers. And then in 2017, we added more varieties, up to 30 varieties, and we planted them out at 3 sites in Morris, Minnesota, on the St. Paul campus, and in Osceola, Wisconsin. And then in 2018, we repeated that again. So we're doing repetition of these studies, looking at them the same way. We spend 1 minute looking at a group of plants, write down all the insects that we see, and total them up at the end of the season. So this was the Morris display garden, and you can see it's kind of these big masses of annuals. This was the Horst Reckelbacher farm out in Osceola, Wisconsin, a private property. It's owned by the family, the Reckelbacher family. Horst Reckelbacher started the company Aveda, which is beauty products. And so we planted out at this area. We had a relationship with the foundation that managed this area. And then on the St. Paul campus, we also planted in our display garden too. So I thought it would be kind of nice to see some pictures of plants for you, but you get an idea of how our plantings were set up. And so we had 9 plants that rose to the top throughout all of these years, and I'll just quickly go through them. The Showstar, which is a sneezeweed, or I'm sorry, this is Melanopodium. This is a butter daisy. We had the sneezeweed called Dakota Gold. This is a very small plant. It's only 12 inches, but really attractive to some of the smaller bees and hoverflies. We had a salvia purple fairy tale, big one with the bumblebees, huge attractant. This salvia summer jewel was also popular with the pollinators. And this is the one that's kind of the wild card for me, because this zinnia was not my favorite zinnia. I thought, it's lime green and it's, not particularly attractive, I don't think, but the bees really liked it. And then this was my favorite one, or one of them, called Orange Fudge. This is an annual Rudbeckia. Another Rudbeckia called Prairie Sun. Helianthus. So this is a semi-dwarf sunflower called Music Box Mix. Another one of my favorite. And I really particularly like this one because of the rebloom factor, kept reblooming up until frost. And then Lemon Queen, which is a good old 8-foot sunflower. So those were the 9 plants that out of this first 4 years became clear that they were the most attractive. And then we kind of went on a tangent. I started thinking about this. I thought, well, this is great that we're growing these annual flowers, but does it have any relationship to, creating better produce or more produce from plants if we plant these pollinator attractive flowers next to or near some of our crops? So I kind of created the second study called Pollinators for Food. And the question that we were asking was, will planting pollinator attractive annual flowers, some of those we'd already studied, nearby improve fruiting and seed set for bell peppers? And I chose bell peppers because they really don't rely on pollinators to set fruit. And so I thought, well, that'd be great. Boy, I wonder if we'll get more peppers if we do have annual flowers. And then there's also the factor that during the heat of the summer, plants in like tomatoes and peppers will kind of stop producing. We saw that a lot in this past summer in June when we had that really extreme heat. Lots of people said that their Solanaceae family or their crops started, kind of stopped producing anything. And so that was another thought, is that will having more bees around actually keep the pollination process going? Guess we find out. So we set up 2 different locations, we had a number of locations in 2018 and also in 2019. And in 2018, we were on St. Paul campus again. We were out at the Arboretum. We were in Perham, Minnesota, and we were in Grand Rapids, Minnesota at our North Central Research and Outreach Center. And in 2019, we repeated the Grand Rapids site. We were at the Osceola farm. And then we also were working with Pillsbury United Communities. So in 2018, what we decided to do is create kind of excluded areas, using basically excluding pollinators from these areas by putting netting over the plants, and then included areas. So those were areas that was wide open. Any insect could come to these plants. And we thought that we planted 36 bell peppers. We chose ACE because it's pretty accommodating for cooler weather, and we were up in zone 3 in Grand Rapids. It's self-fertile. The bees are not required, but would it improve the harvest? And then so we covered half of the crops with netting, and half of the crops we left open to the elements and open to pollinators. And then we planted a flower patch, and you can see in this picture, this is from the Arboretum. You can see that we planted a flower patch at one end by the plants that were open to the elements. And we planted those with some of these plants that we'd studied in this Flowers for Pollinators study. We planted the Rudbeckia orange fudge. We planted a cosmos called Double Click, and we planted the Melampodium showstar. And then we collected data, and I worked with master gardeners the first year. And we had a master gardener who worked with me at the Arboretum. We had a whole group of them up in Grand Rapids. Some of them were in Perham, and some were on the St. Paul campus. And we harvested the peppers when they started to change color, which was indicative of them reaching their mature size. So we wanted to get the biggest, at that mature size, and we measured it. We counted them, weighed them, measured them, and we actually pulled out the seeds and weighed those too. And we knew that 500 seeds equaled 3 grams. And we did that because successful pollination is going to result in more seed. In the 2018 results, the Arboretum site demonstrated a benefit to this. In other words, the open area next to the flower patch produced more peppers, and they were bigger, and we had more of them. Whereas the area that was covered with netting did not produce as well. The Grand Rapids site, our data was kind of insignificant. It wasn't enough difference between the two. The Perham site, we experienced loss there. People were taking the peppers. It was near a county fairground. And then there was also a virus. So we had a lot of plant loss. And then the St. Paul site experienced a lot of pepper poaching. In other words, the plants under the netting, lots of peppers grew, but somebody was out picking all of the peppers in the open area. Even if we had signage up too, and it said, research area, please don't pick the peppers. And I counted, when I pulled the plants up at the end of the season, I counted over 100 what I call pepper stumps, where people would break the pepper off. So that was unfortunate, but those things happen. I hope they enjoyed the peppers. But the Arboretum site demonstrated enough benefit that we felt like we could try this again. So what we decided to do, we modified the experiment a little bit, and we planted a flower patch. So we planted the peppers, took away the exclusion fabric. We planted all the peppers out in the open, and we planted a flower patch by one end of the peppers, and then we interplanted flowers with the peppers. And I have to credit Michelle Mansky for kind of designing this, because when we got talking about doing this, she reached out to me and we kind of said, yeah, let's do this. And I said, well, what's a question you have as a farmer? And she said, well, I just want to know, do I have to plant these flowers between the plants? Can I plant just a bunch of flowers, or is it just good to have flowers nearby? And I said, well, that's the experiment right there. So this was at the Osceola site that you see here, and you can see that in the foreground that there's the salvia is planted between groups of peppers. We planted them between groups of 6 peppers. And then you can see in the far plot there, you can see all the flowers are down at one end. We also had control plots which had no flowers purposefully planted around them at all. So this was out at the Pillsbury United site that Michelle had just shown you. And so the control plots were planted with just the peppers, and in all the sites, other flowers were somewhere nearby. So this was the perennial garden for Pillsbury United, and all the other sites also had flowering plants nearby too. We used the top performers. We used some of the top performers. So we used the Helianthus music box mix. That was one of the dwarf or semi-dwarf sunflowers. We used the Salvia Summer Jewel, the Rebecca Orange Fudge, and the Melanospodium Showstar. So those were the flowers that emerged, if you remember back, they're part of that group of 9 that over the 4 years always kind of were the most attractive to pollinators. So we incorporated those into these pepper plantings. This was up in Grand Rapids. In the foreground, you can see that this is the interplanted site, and around the corner behind this big massive hydrangeas that you see over here was the other planting. And then the controls were over here. So kind of separated from each other. The plant in between here is actually sorghum. It's not corn. A lot of people thought it was, but it's sorghum. And you can see this was in August or so, and they were planting that as a cover. Another picture of that. We labeled everything for people, so as people came by to see this is at one of our research and outreach centers, and so we wanted people to be able to identify the plants and if they were interested in growing them. And then we also had the link to the information there for them. This is at the Reckelbacher farm. You saw a picture of that a little bit earlier. This is Bree. She was one of our interns working there, and she was taking the data at the Reckelbacher farm. So she was harvesting the peppers when they started to turn red, weighing them, measuring, and then weighing the seeds. And this is at Pillsbury. We did use fabric on this mostly to just keep the weeding down, but we saw that nasty bindweed come up through the fabric hole where the pepper was growing and circle around the pepper. So somebody mentioned how someone mentioned how it broke off the plants. It was hard to get off. I understand that. So this was a day, this was actually in the room at the Weight House where Michelle kept her supplies. So she generously allowed me to be in there too. And I was doing my weighing, my measuring, and you can see the peppers. Some of them are a little redder than others, but if they were changing color at all, then we harvested them. Even if they were really small, if they hadn't fully developed, we still harvested them if they turned red. That was kind of the rule of thumb. One of the best things about this project was that all of the peppers went to the Weight House, went to Chef Jose, who turned the peppers into amazing meals for people. And then, so that was the great thing about this project. I don't get to do that very often with my projects. So, because I usually am working with flowers or ornamentals, but this was truly one of the best parts about the project, is to get those peppers to people who could enjoy them and benefit from them. So here are the results. I bet you're all on the edge of your seats wondering what it was. And there was no statistically significant data that supported the flower patch or the interplanted peppers. The controls produced just as well as the rest of them. So I am going with the conclusion that flowers growing nearby is great, is fine. And I think actually for a grower, for a farmer, this is good news, because that's valuable land that those ornamental flowers are taking up. And yes, we all want to grow plants for pollinators. We know the value of pollinators in cross-pollination in our food crops. But the good thing is you can have a border edge around your entire area. You can have a patch on one end of your whole garden, and you're still going to get benefits of the pollinators with these plants. So I think it's actually good news. I was kind of surprised, to be honest, based on that Arboretum data the first year. But look at Grand Rapids, it was statistically insignificant the first year. So I think actually this is good news for growers. Just a little bit on extension, what we've done with this information. We've done a lot of raising of pollinator awareness, kids, a lot of kids programs. The kids worked and took data. We did little mini sessions with them in our display gardens. We had a blog on how pollinator friendly is your landscape and reported our results there and what was going on. We have a great website on pollinators, flowers for pollinators, with a lot of good identification information as well as suggestions and help. And we had a lot of engagement through our Go for Adventures program. This was our Master Gardener program on the St. Paul campus. And we did education outreach through Master Gardener volunteer training. And then also Michelle invited me to participate in Open Streets on Franklin Avenue. And I was with the soils folks who I think are speaking next week and are on this call today. And we had a lot of engagement with people. We gave away seeds, we had handouts, encouraging people to grow some of these pollinator-friendly plants. We did also in 2019 demonstration gardens. We partnered again, like Michelle did, with Homegrown Minneapolis. We used the Flowers for Pollinators, those 9 top performers, and we planted them out in 4 community gardens, one of them being a Pillsbury United garden. And then also in North Minneapolis on Emerson, Thomas, and on Penn Avenue. So these were all gardens that were through the Minneapolis Garden Lease Program. And they were generous enough, the coordinators and the people who managed them were generous enough to let us plant some demonstration so people could see some of the options that they had for interplanting with annual flowers. And there's some of the close-up. This was over on Emerson. And last but not least, we also have been doing a survey. It's how pollinator friendly is my landscape. It's to raise people's awareness about their own landscapes and find out, how pollinator friendly is it? What do I know about this? It's been open since August 17. We've got almost 5,000 responses, people who have gone and taken the survey. We also did a follow-up survey, and we were happy to report that of the 312 people who wanted to be in the follow-up survey, about half of them responded back that 80% had changed their behavior in their gardens. So this is people leaving stems for stem nesting bees, people looking for plants that are pollinator friendly when they go to buy plants or grow seeds, and then 71% spent more time observing pollinators in their backyard. And I really truly feel that if once people's awareness is raised, that they stop reaching for a bottle of chemicals, they learn about the plants, they're not freaked out when they see a whole bunch of insects. They take the moment, take some time to identify them and learn about them. And in a lot of cases, they're beneficial. So so this is, I think it's all good stuff. And I think that's part of our job and extension and as gardeners is to help people to, alleviate some of the fears that they have and the worries that something wrong is happening when actually something very good could be happening. So this is the end of my portion of the presentation, and just encourage everyone in 2021 to plant flowers for pollinators. This is the link to our website on Extension, which has the list of the 9 annual flowers as well as other information about flowers for pollinators. So that is what I have for you tonight.
Julie, did you notice any difference in pests problems when you planted the
That's
flowers?
a great question, Stacy. I know not really. I didn't evaluate that. There's still the powdery mildew on some of the sunflowers, and there's still issues with. We didn't really have slug problems, so we didn't have anything there. I think we might have seen more birds because the sunflower seeds, of course, are attractive to them. And I think the diversity of insects, we evaluated for honeybees and also native bees, but also beetles. So we saw lots of soldier beetles, which are predators. So that's great. They're out there kind of taking care of some of the pesky bugs. We also saw a lot of butterflies, but butterflies are more of an indicator of a healthy landscape versus being very efficient pollinators. You know, they kind of bump into pollen every now and then, but they're out there looking for the nectar too. One of the interesting things about the sunflowers is, you know, a lot of sunflowers are pollenless. And so there was one called the Suntastic Bicolor Pink sunflower, which was a really cool dwarf sunflower. But the bees really enjoyed it. So it must have had a lot of nectar, but it was considered pollenless by the catalog listing. All these plants that we grew were from seed, and we were able to buy the seed. You still can get, I think, almost all of them online. So if you're interested in any of them, they're not too hard to find. Yeah, great question though. That would be a good one to actually analyze, is to look at that.
Well, I ask it because lots of times in class I will get this IPM assignment or whatever to go look for pests, but at home I don't really have pests because I grow like everything and I don't really notice myself having a pest problem. But maybe it's because I don't know, I have too much stuff, and so I don't notice anything but beauty and stuff all the time.
That's great. Maybe, I think probably your cultural methods are really good. You know, you're spacing your plants appropriately and you're watering at the roots where they need the water, not overhead watering. And some of those are pretty classic for encouraging diseases. So it sounds like you're doing everything right.
Julie, do you know of any research that has been done on perennials and annuals for intercropping? So growing perennials and then doing intercropping with annuals that are edible, such as edible or medicinal use, like chamomile or dahlias and, you know, nasturtium and things like that.
Yes, actually, we had a graduate student, Nathan Hecht, who studied borage planted near strawberries. And so he planted a patch of borage at the end of some of the production rows of strawberries up at, I believe it was at the Morris site. Not related to my project, but I was asking Nathan, I was kind of quizzing him for how he did things and how he measured. And he found that the borage, the plants that were closer to the borage were more productive, not hugely more productive, but more productive. And of course, borage is an edible flower, so there you get kind of two crops. That's the one off the top of my head. The other that I was really interested in was from Brazil, and they had planted basil around a green pepper cropping system, and had found that actually, they felt that it raised the production of the green peppers. That was one of the first articles or first studies that I read about, and I found that to be really interesting. So, but perennial wise, I guess just the strawberries, and I'm not sure if they were day neutral strawberries or everbearing or June bearing. I would have to look up Nathan's information on that.
Yeah, can you share that study? Like, send me an email if you do find it. That would be really cool
I
to look
will
at.
I'll make myself a note here.
Thank you. I know that I have set the time to 7:30 and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to speak up or, you know, write in the chat.
You're also welcome to email me too, and there's my email address is on the screen there.
Okay, so Melissa, Michelle, do you guys have any comments or any questions that you want to add before we end for the night?
I had a question that I wanted to add to any farmer, anyone who's interested in answering. So as a farmer, we are incredibly busy. And for instance, this season, the last thing I thought about were flowers, even though they're my favorite to plant and they're really important for pollinators. So I'm wondering if anyone has advice for how to incorporate that into their farm schedule or just to make planting annuals or flowering perennials quicker and easier. For instance, like would taking a packet of seeds and throwing them into your tomato patch um, be a viable option, or are there alternative methods that people have used?
I'm the wrong person to ask because I have done whatever I have wanted. And it has turned out beautiful. And I learned by making the mistakes. I can't pretty much might not really know why something didn't really work over there, but I'll move it. And then I'm figuring it all out as I go. It's kind of like living a beautiful life and, working your way through it and accepting what comes and trying to get to know it all. And in the end, you get beauty and you get some food and you get loved by nature. So I don't know what to tell you about how to do it. I just have done it.
I think one of the things that, and Melissa, you mentioned this in the chat, that a lot of these plants seed, they're self-seeders. And borage is notorious for it. And a lot of the plants you mentioned came up where the peppers were planted. So, there's also understanding that too, that what you put in the ground, what's its life cycle? How does it, if you let it go to seed, are you going to have more next year? And that's a great thing to know, not only from a management standpoint, but also from a propagation standpoint.
My husband, we had a giant pollinator garden. So we decided to, in our front lawn, when we had our house, we planted a really big bee garden or pollinators garden. And that was really helpful because we saw a lot of bee activities. In just the second year of planting our raspberries, we probably harvested like 5+ pounds just from the second year planting from the the raspberry plants, and the raspberries are so big. And then the third year is even bigger. But I know that a lot of you could probably speak to the sentiment of when you plant perennials, they really don't give back, or they really don't start establishing and fruiting until like the year 3 or more, right? So when you decide to plant, even things like sunchokes for the flowers or whatnot, you have to kind of wait a couple of years to even start bearing the benefits of pollinators really coming to those plants too.
It's nice to talk about all this in the winter, isn't it? This is awesome. I can just see that.
I wanted to share 2 groups too, if people are interested in having more. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Maybe somebody else remembers it. But if you're interested in getting more involved into the policy side of things, there's the food committee group or something that meets once a month on Wednesdays. That's led by the city of Minneapolis.
The Minneapolis Food Council?
Thank you.
Is that the one?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the food council group that everyone is invited to, and I highly encourage everyone to go to. That's where a lot of these food action plans are started, and they always want input from the public. And then also the other group on the other side of the growing side of things, Carl Hackinson puts together the TC Growers Network. And it's a space, I haven't been to any of the virtual ones because I've been doing stuff in Madison, but it's a space like this where growers come together and just talk about what works and what doesn't. And he has different presenters come on. So just wanted to share those two resources with everyone. And I feel like dill is a perennial. Let's be honest.
Awesome. Does anybody have any more questions or comments before we close out for the night? I know we went over a little bit and sorry for that, but thank you so much for joining us, you guys.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for Big River Farms and Kazua for organizing this as well.
Thanks you guys for agreeing. Well, this was fun, you guys. I hope to see if you are all able to make it on Wednesday. If not, we're going to be recording it as well, and I'll be sending both links out to you guys through your email. If you are interested and you're not able to make it on Wednesday, I would still encourage you to go register so that I can know that you're interested in that class and I can still send you the link when the class is over with. Okay, sounds great, you guys. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Thank you.